Wrestlers are proper tough people when you think about it. For starters, they're actively throwing their bodies onto a pretty solid ring canvas, through tables, taking chair shots to the head. I don't think it's something everyone could do, and there's a certain resistance to pain you need before you even start thinking about getting involved. If a grazed knee, for example, makes you sad, maybe don't become a pro wrestler. On this day then, I think we should give a respective nod to these warriors who do indeed continue to fight on for our entertainment. Even if it probably means their injuries keep them out longer afterwards. I'm Simon from What Culture, and this is 10 WWE stars who fought through the pain barrier. Number 10, Eddie Guerrero. Happening when Eddie took on JBL at Judgment Day in 2004, it all began when Guerrero botched a blade job. And when I say botched, I mean he cut himself too deeply and the blood that poured forth from his head was just otherworldly. It was so bad, it drenched the mat and almost the entire ringside area. How he made it through I will never know, but he did. And that included a post-match angle where he beat down JBL further and hit a frog splash. You can see that he's not all good though, with his legs slowly becoming the equivalent of jelly. I don't think this was selling either, and the word on the street was Guerrero went into shock backstage and was recommended to undergo a blood transfusion. Eddie refused, but still, this really was a moment of a wrestler going through the pain barrier while also putting his own life on the line. Not sure I could do that, to be honest. Number 9, The Undertaker. At WrestleMania 30, when the Dead Man took on and shock horror lost to Brock Lesnar, there was more happening than at first met the eye. In short, Taker suffered a serious concussion that pretty much stopped him in his tracks. It was clear something was off too. The Phenom was sluggish almost throughout the entire match, and it was a complete 180 to a lot of his Mania performances up to this point. It was really bad as well, so much so that after the match was over and Taker was being taken to the hospital, Vince McMahon went with him. Think of that, during the biggest show of the year. That means something very bad had happened. Much like everyone in this list, it cannot be overstated how impressive it is that he finished the match, even if the injury did hamper the overall quality of his performance. Mark Calloway is just one tough mother. Number 8, Mr. Perfect. This one is a little different, as you wouldn't have even known Mr. Perfect was in pain when he took on Bret Hart for the IC title at SummerSlam 1991. At least I didn't. This incredible technical masterpiece is as good today as it was all those years ago. When you find out how much hell Kurt Hennig was going through, it doesn't make any sense. The short version is his back was absolutely screwed at this point after a career of taking spectacular bumps. Don't forget, these aren't the rings we're used to today. These are the ones Mick Foley once referred to as cement. So imagine throwing yourself onto cement all day and you'll have an idea of where Perfect was at. If you need more, however, Hennig basically had a broken tailbone and some bulged discs, and yet still made Bret Hart look like $1 million. It's one of the reasons he taps out so quickly in the sharpshooter. Pain was too much. Even still, if you want to talk guts and toughness, this right here is a good starting point. Number 7, Kurt Angle. WrestleMania 19's main event was a weird one because not only was Kurt Angle a ticking time bomb injury-wise as he entered the fray, but when all was said and done, his opponent Brock Lesnar was mangled too after landing on his neck. It was a treacherous situation to say the least. If you want the headlines though, Angle did indeed walk down the aisle with a broken neck here and barely had any use of his left arm. How he wrestled a match is anyone's guess, but he did. It left its own scars too, because that's how Lesnar hurt himself. He was terrified of his shooting star press making the Olympic gold medalist even worse, so he was a touch hesitant. And we all know what happened next. The fallout from this was that Kurt did get the neck surgery he was told he needed 4 weeks prior to Mania's main event. Wrestlers, man, they're crazy. Number 6, Steve Austin. It wasn't just Angle who walked into WrestleMania 19 in dubious circumstances either, as Stone Cold Steve Austin did the same in his match against The Rock. Aside from numerous injuries building up over the years to the point this would be the Rattlesnake's last bout, he also had a serious anxiety attack the day prior. It got so bad his heart rate was at near cardiac arrest levels. It was a catch-22 situation, as this worry had been brought on by his fears he'd stink up the joint because of the aforementioned elements. This is what makes Austin's performance that night so great, however. Not only did he put in a shift and then some, he did it in spite of everything else. It was a more than worthy third act between himself and the Great One at WrestleMania. Just to add some more kudos Steve Austin's way, he also decided not to make a big deal about the fact he was retiring in order to keep WWE's popularity high, thinking that if fans thought he was going away, they may perceive it to be an end of an era and go off and do other things. And they did do that, but maybe they just took a little bit longer to do it. Number 5, Steve Austin. Again, this time taking place at SummerSlam 1997. It was probably the moment where Austin's toughest SOB nickname came to fruition. After all, on this night he got tombstone on his neck by Owen Hart, which shattered it into 1,000 pieces. It would also be the start of all his future problems. It was so severe, Stone Cold was momentarily paralysed following it, and the man still somehow crawled over to Hart and rolled him up for the win. I mean, it looked awful, because of course it did. How Austin even managed this, well, I don't even know. In this scenario, I don't think anyone would have begrudged him from just laying there and calling the whole thing off. That's not what he did, and Austin gutted it out and followed the story through to its conclusion. Now that is tough. Number 4, Triple H. One of the most famous injuries in WWE history, which sounds weird. Triple H tearing his quad during a tag team match in 2001 on an episode of Raw has gone down in the books, mostly due to the extensive rehab he had to go through afterwards. The strangest thing about it though was how mundane it was. As he went to break up a Walls of Jericho, he hit Y2J with a weak forearm, and as he planted his foot, that was it. The quadricep detached itself entirely from the bone. It was so bad that Triple H described it as feeling as if he'd been shot in the leg, and he was legitimately unable to put any weight on it. Yet what did he do? That's right, he finished the match, not only that, but allowed himself to be put in the Walls of Jericho. Can you imagine that pain? His reason for this was simply, the show goes on, and this gutsy performance is probably why he was cheered so much on his return. I think most of us would have given up in this situation and cried. Number 3, Shawn Michaels. In so much pain with his back he wouldn't wrestle for another 4 years after his world title clash with Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14, there was a point when Shawn Michaels didn't think he'd return at all. His back was that bad. Stemming from that year's Raw Rumble where he'd smashed his coccyx on the edge of a casket, at first it just seemed like a small knock. A few weeks later, it was obvious it was a lot worse. HBK was so hurt he couldn't even step back in a ring, leaving Savio Vega to replace him during an In Your House event, which makes what he was able to do against Stone Cold even more impressive. It's not a great match, but all things considered, it's pretty damn good, and given that when I hurt my back I can't even get out of bed, well, all the props have to go to Shawn Michaels. And sure, there's all the rumours and innuendo that maybe, just maybe, he was also refusing to do the job, to the point Undertaker strapped up his fist and threatened to punch him if he didn't, but still, going through all of this with a back that bad, he deserves some of our respect. Number 2, The Undertaker and Mankind. As nuts as The Undertaker and Mankind's match was at King of the Ring 1998, there's even more that was happening outside of it. Even before this kicked off, Taker had screwed up his ankle so bad they had to structure the match around it. You can even see him wince when he drops in from the Hell in the Cell to the floor because he's in that much pain. And then of course there's Foley himself. Whether it was being thrown off the cell or through it, the match really should have stopped after one of these incidents, and yet despite having a tooth wedged in his nostril or whatever that was, he carried on. How on earth? And let's not forget the dozens of other injuries he must have built up after being smashed through that table. It's as crazy today as it was almost 20 years ago, and I genuinely don't know how he got back up. But that's Mick Foley for you, a man with an insane tolerance for pain and an all-round hero to boot. All I will say is, don't try this at home. Number 1, Sin Cara. Just for some levity, and because they say opposites attract, we end this list with someone who decided not to fight through the pain barrier and was ostracised because of it, or so it seems. But on the August 19th, 2013 edition of Raw, the original Sin Cara decided his match should be stopped after he dislocated his finger. Now I've dislocated my own finger and it hurts like hell. But you can imagine what a room full of wrestlers who had fought through broken necks and smashed legs thought of this. They weren't best pleased. And neither was his foe that night, Alberto Del Rio. Absolutely incensed, he basically shouted at Sin Cara to stop being a baby. But this is the ever-growing question in the world of pro wrestling. When is enough enough? And should wrestlers stop when niggles happen to protect their long-term futures? If this instance was anything to go by, no, they shouldn't. Because everyone will hate you.
Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Aren't you a star? Don't forget to subscribe below, and also the people who made this video, they're right here, so go and follow them and give them some love. If you want to see more content, there's probably some stuff flowing up above my head. Why not check it out? It could be fun. I'm not your dad.